All right, I made this video in response to the reflection activity on desmos that we did today, and I think there's a chance that I may go off on tangents and ramble a little bit, and I apologize in advance for doing that. One of the things that I think we're in a unique opportunity to do this year is learn about something that's new and different and document the process the whole way along. Like I understand that this year is uncomfortable and people are frustrated, and that's where a lot of the mental health concerns that have been raised are coming from. Um, One thing that I find empowering is that we are in a unique time and place to figure out a better way for schools, for education, and for communication. And so in this video, one of the things I'm thinking about is just how to create a video that's a reflective feedback tool for myself and my students, and also one that other teachers might watch and use the same activity or do the same kind of thing where they record themselves that I might learn from watching their process from. Two of the things that, well, one of the things that we don't get to do as much this year as teachers that I think as a student, you might think teachers are in this game to teach you about rational functions and where the vertical and horizontal asymptotes are on the graph. But I think most of us got into this profession because it really is the connection to our students that we want to have. We want to help them understand how the world works. We want to be able to go on random tangents every now and again. And um, this year is sort of forcing us to focus almost entirely on the content, which is unfortunate because it's harder to do that. And also there's a bit of a vacancy. So two of the things that I find interesting, just before I even go back into the feedback, they're kind of math related that you don't have to take notes on and learn and know the learning targets at the end of the course, but that I like to talk about in my class are one, this idea of scale invariance, which is a topic that I think in the future is going to be a hot topic in math. You've probably heard fractals, and the idea of a fractal is things that exhibit the same properties when viewed at different scales. So, and there's actually a hedge fund manager that's made billions of dollars, maybe millions of dollars. He's made a lot of money and he's become famous, called Nassim Taleb, who's invested on this idea that because we view everything as if it's normally distributed, we don't have a good enough concept of this term scale invariance. He's been able to manipulate that, and it's created profits for him. So that's something I think is interesting. And I specifically think that you can see, like, when we start talking about criticisms you have of school, I think that they're reflective of systems in general, and can give us a window into why it's difficult to make a lot of the systems work and what are the pitfalls we sometimes run into. Another thing that I find just interesting is this book I just read, The Math Gene, which is about math and it's about this process of abstract thinking. But what I found really cool was that he connected it to language. And so he talks a lot about this idea of offline thinking. And I guess what he means by offline thinking is that, like, if you put a piece of cheese in front of a rat, the rat pictures that cheese and gets hungry. And then if you take the cheese away, the rat and some other animals probably can still keep thinking about the cheese. But what makes humans' brains unique is that we can picture the cheese there before it's ever there. And that's what he calls offline thinking. And he goes on to write a lot about what enables abstract thinking. And essentially the point he arrives at is that math is about abstract thinking, and it's the same type of abstract thinking that we do when we learn languages. And so it's kind of hardwired into all of our brains. But then there's something about it, there's an emotional piece to it too, where math is very much about um, overcoming that feeling like you don't get it. And I think that's something that's kind of interesting, is like, at least if there's something you want to find empowering about this year, is you can practice what you do when you don't get something. It doesn't have to just be in math, you eventually have to pick yourself back up and get back at it. But I think that you can be realizing that when you go through things that are in unanticipated and structurally in just like bad, you do learn from going through that. So this is a little bit of a preparation for um, understanding who you are in the future. All right. So that's my speech. The first question I asked on here was, do you agree or disagree that rolling backpacks should be banned from school? I asked that question because I had no idea that was such a hot topic amongst kids. It took me a long time to get to the point as a teacher where I'm at now, where I'm not perfect at this. This is a kind of a lifelong goal, but is learning how to listen to my students. And this had never even occurred to me as a teacher, but I've learned that one question that you can get as classroom that doesn't like talking to talk about is, what do you think of rolling backpacks? And I don't know if that's specific to our campus because it's partially outdoors, but it was interesting. It was provocative. And I got a lot of responses that said, they tend to run over your feet. I more on agree, because the kids who be dragging those backpacks do not care whether those mini suitcases are dragging my feet. They're annoying, but you shouldn't ban them. It's someone's choice to use them. Also, students with disabilities may need them. I thought that was a good point. It's up to the students whether they want a rolling backpack or not. I don't think it's up to the school to decide what type of backpack we should be carrying. Some students have health issues, and maybe a rolling backpack is more suitable for them. I think that's a good response. And I only asked the question because I know it's the type of question that students have feelings around. I certainly wouldn't support a ban on them. And a lot of the things I wonder is, are these issues in other schools? Like, for example, I think at the school we're at, we know that we're in an affluent community. We have advantages, we have resources, and that oftentimes talking in a way that ignores the advantages you have is offensive to people that haven't had those advantages. So I bring that up because I think when I'm going through this, picturing a broader audience looking at this, I think that it's important to reflect on the fact that our needs as learners are much different than the needs that kids who don't even have a wireless connection or even a Chromebook. And I think it's important to recognize that these are privileged, these are somewhat entitled needs that you guys bring up. And when we get to mental health, I think that's kind of a good thing to keep in mind. Not because I want to be shoving your privilege down your faces or anything, but I think it's important to understand, for me, how the world works is to understand how kind of privileged communities have a way of prioritizing their needs, and it's done so at the expense of validating feelings and creating this kind of objectivity. The first question I asked is, what have you learned about your learning? I've learned that I really need a quiet and separate environment from home to focus. I need to put away distractions when in my classes, or I will get distracted really easily and kind of zone out. That I get more things done when I have a schedule for my homework, for doing homework. I learned that I learn much better in person than in virtual school. Those are interesting. I really do think that what you're learning about this year more than anything else is about your own learning style. High schools don't focus on this enough, and we need to do better in the future. But you can be focusing on what helps you learn and what things you need to avoid that keep you distracted. This says, I rarely ever learn anything. I end up forgetting a lot of information after a quiz or exam that required me to know said information. Most likely my fault, though. I don't think it's your fault. What I think school often overdoes is forces you to learn things that don't have that much application or that much meaning to you. And the brain really isn't hardwired to remember things that don't have application or don't have meanings. It's really good at remembering things that we learn experientially, but we've turned learning into something that is removed, decontextualized from its experiences. And I think that's a problem. What makes distance learning better? I do think that when this year is over and we're back in a normal setting, there are going to be a lot of lessons from this year that will fundamentally improve the way education is done. It may be too soon to start thinking about those, but these were good things that I heard about that. The way teachers have become more understanding of kids' circumstances. I feel like distance learning has taught me how to use online resources better than I did before. one aspect that distance learning makes better is having more time to sleep since school starts later. They should understand teen sleep schedules. It's impossible to function at 8. We should start school at 9. There is actually research out there that shows schools that kids learn better later on in the day, and a lot of schools are moving towards later schedules. And you know, I would be lying if I said I let's see, I forgot how many negatives I was going to put in that sentence, but I enjoy the extra sleep time as well. Um, and I think it's one of those things that we're going to go back to normal, and we're going to appreciate some of the things that we um, didn't appreciate before when we get back to it. But then we're also going to miss this, like this time we're in now when we could sleep in till 5 minutes before class started. Not that I do that, but I can tell from some of your hairdo that that's what you do. All right, so I think my title on this was a little bit messed up. I asked um, what are schools doing well, or what could we learn from this experience? So schools should learn that it's not all about the tests and grades, that they should be better at helping the students to learn rather than have them characterized by grades. Schools should learn that students need more time to learn the material. You can't shorten the time and keep this curriculum the same. Definitely the school system now is just about assignments, not really interaction. I feel like we need more interaction as well. And I agree with all these things. And I think that schools institutionally have a lesson to learn from this whole example year. And I also think it's hard. It's harder than it seems. Like we can't just put you guys in a room and say, "Go ahead, interact." Even though I think everybody's craving that interaction with other people, there's something holding us from getting to that headspace where we feel comfortable interacting with people too. Hardest part of distance learning, probably just remembering and applying all the content I learn in my classes. The classes are just short if there isn't a lot of application of what we learn. It's really hard to stay focused and stare at a screen for so long. We have no interaction. It's just about completing the assignment, keeping myself accountable and making my own schedules. I like this because it's self-critical and a little bit personally empowering, but I do recognize the other concerns too. And I apologize if I'm making you stare at a screen more while you're doing this. You can close your eyes though, because I'm reading the things aloud. One criticism for schools: listen to students more. You pretend to care, but in reality, do the cheapest thing you can in any situation. It's irritating. I think that administration needs to listen to students more, especially during distance learning. Many teachers are trying to cram their whole year, which represents itself as more homework for kids. This is a terrible idea. Instead, the content should either be limited to more important topics or make sure the student is learning rather than beating them down with tests and homework. They think we are robots, and just because we are at home, they give us so many assignments and make them do on the weekend. I recognize this. I think this is the thing in an affluent school district where test scores tend to be high. This is the feedback that needs to be heard, that we are over emphasizing content and it's leading to mental health issues. And I think it's important when making this statement to think of how that would come off to a school district where they don't even have Chromebooks, they don't have the Wi-Fi connections, and you're listening to kids who complain about their own mental health when they don't even got the time to be worried about their mental health. They're worried about things that are much bigger and deeper. But I think it is one where you can relate the two because, in my opinion, this is sort of how institutions or systems evolve. And it's also how individuals evolve. It's like we learn a lot of ways to dismiss the people we're trying to listen to. And so schools are ostensibly created for students. But I think as a system, we've learned a lot of ways to dismiss the student's voice. And a lot of times, the ways we try to correct for that, the ways we try to give kids opportunities to give us feedback are more about box checking than they are about actually listening and responding to it. And so I think, to me, the lesson is that there's an opportunity here for students to find a way to speak back to schools. I think. I mean, I think if you try to make sense of all the things that have happened in the world this last year, these last 10 years, a lot of it has to do with new forms of communication, enabling people that didn't used to have a voice from speaking up. And then there's a lot of it that happens like when people earn the right to speak up, or when people do speak up, people who are either in favor of the status quo or benefit from the status quo or have power tend to react. And I think that just like a lot of events we've seen in that way, schools have kind of evolved to ignore the role of power structures and dismiss the voice of students. And you all probably have somebody in your life that you do the same thing to, somebody that you find annoying, like a little sibling or something like that. And you have 1,000 different ways to dismiss what they're trying to tell you. And so I would say, in addition to the fact that students need to find a way to speak to schools in a way that's constructive, there is a bit of this that any individual can take as a way to be personally reflective. How do we improve class? I really liked that you guys gave me some feedback here. And it was feedback that I could act on. It didn't feel like it was overly negative, and a lot of it just acknowledge the fact that we're just doing something new and different. There are necessarily sacrifices that we all have to make. So there's not time to accommodate everybody's needs. But what we want to be practicing more than anything is adapting. And so I think it would be helpful if we did in-class notes together so we could ask questions as we could go and understand the curriculum better. We need more time to ask questions and less on talking. There isn't a whole lot of teaching and more about just doing activities to pick up an understanding of the content by yourself. I think we should use Delta Math more than CPM. Those are all good ideas. And I think most teachers teach to the type of student they were. And I was the type of student that wanted less direct instruction and more time to myself, not to myself, but time to interact with the material. I've chosen to structure class where the direct instruction is more of like an opt-in. Like that's why I create the videos and have you guys watch them during class, but you can also go back and rewatch them. I think one of the sacrifices I make of doing that versus having like more lectures is that we don't have that space where everybody can ask questions, and you might not know what your question is, but somebody else is able to articulate it. And so I'll take that into account, and I'll see what I do moving forward. Let's see. Oh, this is more criticism for this class. All right, good. A piece of criticism for this class is we could do more in-class lectures instead of videos. I don't feel like I understand a whole lot. I'm not blaming you, but the school. I mean, we skipped the whole other half of Algebra 2, making pre-calc even harder. I feel like lessons are confusing because we need more practice and need more to get familiar with a lesson before we move on. More practice, more in-depth, make it super easy first, then slowly make it harder. Yeah, I feel that. And I also have to admit that that's just, it's worded well to recognize that these are just things that happened, that you go down the wrong road trying to blame somebody for everything. And this is worded in a way that acknowledges there are things that aren't perfect, things that we're trying to solve. And yeah, I think sometimes one of the things that we're bad at as a system is giving and receiving critical feedback, and sometimes it's the giving part, like giving feedback without validating the person you're giving it to is one of the ways that things blow up in our faces. I don't know if I'm going to be prepared for calculus. While I'm learning a lot in this class, I'm still scared that I won't be prepared for next year. And yeah, I mean, I would like to say you can do it. To be honest, I think it's going to be really hard to make a jump from course 2 into calculus next year. What I will say is that there's never been more resources for you available at your fingertips if you want to put in the time. The thing about math is that it's a lot harder to, like, the math gene thing I said, like overcoming that feeling when you don't get something and sticking with it is more difficult in other subjects. So, and I don't expect AP Calculus to modify its pace next year, given the circumstances that we were in this year. So we can talk more about that, but there will be AP Calculus and there will be calculus. And this relates to mental health. which I believe is next. Like, I think it's important to recognize that this community we're in puts unnecessary stress on students to do well academically, to know what they want in their future, to and it's not always intentional. A lot of times, it isn't even coming directly from the adults, because it's the atmosphere that students create, and it's peer pressure. And it's hard to hammer home this point, because you don't realize it until you actually leave high school and you get into college, and then like that there is immense pressure put on students, and it's all for this one piece of your life that's a piece of paper that is your college application. Well, it's submitted electronically nowadays, but um, you can talk to older siblings if you have them in college, or you know, adults. Adults love it when you ask them questions like this, like what did you get out of your college experience? What do you wish you knew from when you were in high school, or something like that? Like, I think most of them will tell you that it's not a life or death. It's not like if you don't get into the right college that your life is over. It's really, you really have, coming from the places that you come from, all you have to do is keep trying, and you're going to be successful. Um, so, um, as far as mental health goes, this is what I got, was that the school doesn't use the support counselor as much as they should. She could help a lot of students right now. I think that's good, a good point. And shout outs is that, oh, this is what I forgot to say. Yeah, sometimes you ask a question just so that you can answer it for yourself once everyone gets a turn. This is like the oldest teacher trick in the book, but I guess I preempted myself by answering that question. All I wanted to say was about mental health. Like, the mental health things that people are going through, I think have a lot to do with that artificial pressure, um, the socially constructed pressure of the college application, and it may help to just kind of like close your eyes and breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth, and remind yourself that it's going to be all right. Um, but then the last thing was shout outs. These are good shout outs. Group. Grant for the music. Grant was a good DJ for this whole thing. And then shout out to my dog, Cooper. And I'm assuming we're talking about like dog, like the animal dog, not dog like friends. Either way, Cooper gets a shout out. I hope this was helpful if anybody listened. And even if nobody listened, this was helpful for me, because I just like to picture myself talking when and pretending people are listening. That's therapeutic for me. All right. Thank you.